Hello. Working again on example problems on how to do these constant velocity model representation questions. This example is going to go through how to deal with some of the graphical representations using this example problem. And again, the reminder, if you haven't watched the other videos, the grayed out sections have information present in them, but they are not questions that you're supposed to do. You're supposed to do the questions that are not grayed out or the portions that are not grayed out. I definitely need this information in this grayed out section for the word-based representation to do stuff. Um, and that's necessary, but I don't need to complete anything there. For the purposes of these examples, I'm kind of going through and changing what's grayed out and what isn't grayed out. So in the previous example, uh, or I've already completed the word-based representation. So now I'm going to work on the graphical representation. I'm going to try to take information that is present and available in this question and make a graph that accurately represents what we've got going on here. So up here, they tell us the cyclist changes position from 300 meters to 700 meters linearly with time from 0 seconds to 4 seconds. So I need to make a graph that shows that. So to do that, I'm going to take this image and I'm going to open this image up and edit the graph in that image. I'm going to provide a label for each axis, units of measure, relevant numbers, and then put the graph on there. So I'm going to try to remember a couple of things at a time. I'll probably have to open and close, go back and forth to see it. Um, so first things first, I'm going to try to put my axes titles and units of measure in. That's significant stuff that we really need to have down first. And so our y-axis title, come on now, should be position, and we're using D for that. I know that's a strange choice, D and position, but we often think of it as distance, or another science word that we'll use is displacement. So if we go that route, D works for displacement. It kind of works for distance. We try to stick with thinking about displacement. We'll get into that later. Um, but we use that. Otherwise, for position, sometimes people would just use the letter X or Y to talk about motion lefty, righty, or motion vertically. But in my experience, that just screws up what we're talking about with graphs, since you have an x-axis and a y-axis. So I'm sticking with D for displacement or position. That's in our y-axis, the up and down axes. Lefty, righty, that axis has been time. So the title of that axis is, I'm just going to put a T for time. And then the unit of measure, we are generally measuring things in seconds. And I think that's what this question does. So I have time in seconds. And so I've got now my x-axis titled and labeled with units of measure. I've got my y-axis titled and labeled with units of measure. I'm going to go back and now try to figure out what the numbers are, just to make sure. I sometimes forget going back and forth. So now I go back, and the numbers changes from 300 meters to 700 meters. 300 meters to 700 meters, 0 seconds to 4 seconds. So I'm going to try to remember that. Oh, okay. So it ends at 700 meters. So I'm going to change this to 700 meters. And you can see that it's getting all kind of buggered up there. I'm just going to stretch that bugger out. Hey, a little bit less buggered. There's 0 meters where the time axis is, but the cyclist doesn't start there. They start at 300 meters. This is in the negative side of the axis. I'm just using this box as a starting point, and then I'm going to move it up here. So um, you might remember from previous questions that we've worked on that we can go in the positive or negative direction. And in this case, we're having a cyclist start at 300 and going to 700 meters. And it said that it finished in 4 seconds. I can just put the number 4 there. I don't need to put an S since I have the S over there. And then this is where 0 seconds is. That's on our graph there. So I'm not going to put a 0 seconds there. If I really wanted to, I could I could copy paste to throw a 0 in there, but that's not necessary. So now I've got everything labeled. Um, And the next thing that I still need to do is include a line that shows how this thing is moving. So it's going from 300 to 700, from 0 seconds to 4 seconds. So I'm going to select a line, and I'm going to start at 300, and then I'm going to go. So that's when 4 seconds is. I'm going to go and say, hey, there's 4 seconds there. That's going to be where the 700 is. My personal preference is just to try to make these lines a little bit more visible. So I'm going to do that for myself, and also, I guess, for you guys, so you can see. Dang it, I always do that. Add an unnecessary line. So 300 meters to 700 meters. I guess I should try to make sure that that looks like it's there on the 700. And I should maybe try to make sure this looks like that's right on the 4. And there, now I have my graph drawn, axes labeled, save and close, and there you go. And now I've taken care of the white section on this thing. That's how the position time graphs go. Period, I guess. I'll do additional sections. There are additional videos for these other sections. Have a good one.